quiet evening, the kind of evening where the world seemed to slow down. The sun was setting, casting long shadows on the ground as Emma walked through the park. She was lost in her own world, her feet moving mechanically, her mind overwhelmed with the weight of the darkness that had settled in her heart. Every day felt the same. A gray haze of loneliness and despair. She couldn't remember the last time she had truly felt alive. As she walked, she heard something faint. A sound in the distance, drifting through the cool air. It was soft at first, but it grew louder guitar music. The notes, gentle and calming, reached her ears, pulling her closer like a magnetic force. For a moment, she hesitated. It was so unlike her to stop, but something about the music made her heart skip a beat. She walked slowly toward the source of the sound, her curiosity growing. The boy was sitting on a bench, his guitar cradled in his arms. His fingers moved gracefully over the strings, creating a melody that seemed to speak directly to her soul. He didn't see her at first, lost in his music. But when he looked up, their eyes locked. For a brief moment, everything else in the world disappeared. "Hey," he said, his voice soft but warm. "Do you like music?" Emma nodded, unsure of how to respond. She wasn't ready for a conversation, but something about him made her feel safe. She couldn't explain it, but she felt drawn to him. "I'm Noah," he said, setting the guitar down and giving her a small smile. "Emma," she whispered, her voice barely audible. That was the beginning. The moment when everything changed, but neither of them knew it yet. The next evening, Emma found herself back at the park, walking toward the sound of Noah's guitar. This time, she wasn't sure why she was there. She had no plans to stay long. But as she approached, she noticed something different. Noah wasn't alone. A man was sitting next to him, speaking in hushed tones, his face shadowed by the darkness of the night. Emma stopped in her tracks, watching from a distance. There was something unsettling about the conversation. She couldn't hear the words, but she could feel the tension. The stranger's face was tense, and Noah's smile faltered as he spoke. It didn't last long, and as quickly as the conversation started, it ended. The stranger stood up and disappeared into the night. Noah seemed shaken. His guitar was back in his hands, but his usual confidence was gone. His eyes were distant, and he barely noticed Emma as she approached. "Are you okay?" she asked before she could stop herself. Noah looked at her, startled, as if he hadn't noticed her standing there. He forced a smile, but there was something off about it. "I'm fine," he said quickly, picking up his guitar again and strumming a few notes. But Emma wasn't convinced. There was a heaviness in the air, a quiet mystery surrounding him that made her uneasy. Something was wrong, and she could feel it deep in her bones. The next few days were filled with an unsettling tension. Emma continued to meet Noah in the park, but the carefree atmosphere they once shared had changed. Noah seemed more withdrawn, his laughter less frequent. And then, one evening, Emma found him sitting alone in the park. His guitar was beside him, but he wasn't playing it. He was staring at the ground, his face pale, his body tense. Emma approached carefully. "Noah?" she asked softly, unsure of how to break the silence. He looked up, his eyes clouded with something Emma couldn't quite place. "Fear? Guilt? Regret? I don't know how to say this," Noah began, his voice shaky. "I've been keeping something from you. I don't want you to be scared." Emma's heart began to race. She wasn't prepared for this, for whatever Noah was about to reveal. She stepped closer, her breath catching in her throat. "Noah, what's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. He hesitated, his eyes flickering to the guitar beside him. "The music," he said quietly, as if it was the only thing he could say. "It's not just a way to escape. It's a lifeline. But there are people who don't want me to have it, people I've tried to leave behind." Emma was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. She didn't understand. "Who?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Noah's face tightened, and for a moment he seemed like a stranger to her. "Someone she didn't know. People from my past," he said finally. "They've found me. They know about the music and they won't let me go. Not until I do what they want." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. There was something dangerous in his words, something that made her stomach twist with fear. She wanted to help him, but she didn't know how. Days passed, and Noah grew more distant. He stopped coming to the park as often, and when he did, he was always looking over his shoulder as if he were being watched. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. One evening, she waited in the park, staring at the empty bench where Noah usually sat. She felt an uneasy calm in the air, like a storm was coming. Just as she was about to leave, she saw him, Noah, standing at the edge of the park, his eyes scanning the area. He was clearly on edge. When he saw her, he rushed over, his face pale. "You need to leave," he said urgently. "Now." Emma's heart raced. "What's happening? What's going on?" "No time to explain, just trust me. Go home, please." Before she could say anything else, he turned and walked quickly away, disappearing into the night. Emma stood there, frozen. She didn't understand. Was this the end? Was this the last time she'd see him? The next morning, Emma couldn't stop thinking about Noah. She hadn't heard from him since that night, and it gnawed at her. She couldn't just let him go, not after everything they'd shared. She needed to know the truth. She went to the park, hoping to find him. When she arrived, her heart sank. The bench was empty, and there was no sign of Noah. She walked around, calling his name softly, but there was nothing. Only the echo of her own voice. Just as she was about to leave, she saw him, walking toward her from a side path. His eyes were bloodshot, his expression haunted. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I didn't want you to get caught up in this. But it's too late. They're after me now, and if they find you, they'll hurt you." Emma's heart pounded in her chest. "Who? Who's after you?" Noah hesitated, his gaze darting around the park nervously. He leaned in close and whispered, "I used to be involved with dangerous people. They want me back, and they'll stop at nothing to get me. They'll hurt anyone who stands in their way. Even you." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. "What do we do now?" Noah's voice was a soft whisper, barely audible. "We fight. Together." And in that moment, Emma knew. This love story was only just beginning. The road ahead was dark and uncertain, but she wasn't going to